So welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders and thinkers. Today, I'm joined by Mark Schaefer. Absolutely delighted that you're here on the show, Mark. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself to our international audience. Over to you, Mark.
Well, I suppose I am creative. I've written 10 books. I've blogged for, like 15 years, I think. My podcast is in its 11th season now. So that's the creative part, I guess. I don't know. I'm a thinker, maybe. I don't know, because I'm an academic, I guess. And I'm a consultant, marketing strategy consultant. I teach at a big university in America. I'm a keynote speaker, and I've just published my 10th book. I think those are the main things about me. And I love Ireland. I'm half Irish, and I love Ireland.
That's
so
great.
I just got to stick that in there because I'm always happy to talk to my friends in Ireland.
Well, thanks very much, Mark. And listen, not only are you creative, a leader and a thinker, I'm going to say it because you're one of the world's leading marketing futurists. There's no doubt about it. You're an exceptional international keynote speaker. And just for our audience listening, 7 patents, 10 best-selling books, a couple of master's degrees, Rutgers University faculty. You've been on BBC, New York Times, NPR, CNN, CBS, Time, Wall Street Journal. So I just want to give you that, Mark, because I know in your summary there, I just want people to fully understand your expertise, which is probably 3 decades now of expertise in this area.
Even a little north of that, even.
All righty. But delighted to have you here. So look, let's move on. I want to ask you a few questions if I can. The book that I'm reading at the moment is your latest book, and I think it's truly exceptional because the thing that stuck with me is, beyond the brand, but you're talking about the community is sort of the last bastion, the final frontier in marketing. Could you just unpack that a little bit for me and my audience, please?
I love that. I haven't really thought about it in those terms, the last bastion, the final frontier, sort of Star Trek-like. I like that very much, Simon. Well, what's great branding? It's about building an emotional connection between what you do and your audience so that you mean something. You feel something when you hear a name or you think you hear of a brand. And that's getting increasingly difficult to do. We live in a world where people don't really see ads anymore. If by luck they would see them, they don't really believe them. And especially when it comes to young people today, they're just kind of created this own bubble for themselves, this own, alternative media universe. And so I talk about community as being the last great marketing strategy because it was the first marketing strategy. I mean, you and I are just, 1 or 2 generations away from our families that they actually knew the people in the stores that they went to. That's where they would get their meat or their flowers or their clothes, and they would know their families. And so I think we long to belong, not just from a business perspective, but from a psychological and sociological perspective. That's one of the key ideas in the book, is that we've got this big mental health issue. I'm sure it's the same where you live. It's in the news literally every day. And so what I propose in the book is that community is perhaps the greatest overlooked marketing strategy in the history of overlooked marketing strategies. It's right in front of our face. It's not new, but we haven't considered it from a brand marketing perspective. Now, this is a business book with, I think, a very rock solid business case why this should be considered as a marketing strategy. But the fact is, it's not only marketing that works, it can be marketing that heals. And I think so it's exciting on a whole different level, because once all this other like advertising and PR and all these other things sort of fade away, we're still going to have community. We'll always have community. And it's something we need to think about in our businesses, in our marketing portfolios.
Mark, I absolutely love that. I couldn't agree more. And I love the fact that, it's not just marketing that works, but it could be marketing that heals. And as you were talking there and talking about a generation or two ago, you took me right back in the moment to my grandmother and me and her in a store. She knew the shopkeeper. She had a wicker basket. There were no carrier bags, no plastics, no
Oh, wow.
technology, no electronic till.
Love
The
it.
cheese was cut with a wire. It was wrapped in paper, probably wax at the time. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
And that rapport and that community, you took me right back there in that instant. And I think that really helps to illustrate the point. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mark.
Mhm. Yeah, I've got a similar story in the book about a story my grandfather would go to that's still there, and they still know everybody. And it's just like when I visited this store and just watched how it worked, I thought, I have never belonged to anything like that in my life. I hate shopping, but we long for that. Inside of us, that hasn't changed. We long for that. And that's why I think it can be so powerful to start thinking about it, in a digital way or in a community, in real life sort of way.
Yeah, and I suppose I want to get into a little bit about content if I can, Mark, because you wrote an exceptional post recently, and it kind of relates to what we're talking about here in terms of engagement, that emotional connection. But obviously, we're very high on AI at the moment at the time of recording. Your post recently about beyond the basics, the 20 non-obvious use cases for Chat GPT for marketing. I thought it was an exceptional piece, and I'd encourage anybody who hasn't seen it to go and search that out on the Rise Above the Noise area. And I mean, even down to the imagery that you used with Midjourney, it's an exceptional article. And I just wanted to get your view on this, because people who think we're busy now, or there's a lot of noise to cut through now, or there's just so much content, it's hard to make an engagement. It's almost as though we've just pressed the turbo button with this AI monster. So
Oh,
just could you share some of your thoughts on that,
yeah.
Mark, in terms of where community, connection, engagement, and then this huge sort of wave of content seems to be heading our way pretty quickly?
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a friend of mine characterized it the other day as the AI tsunami. And I think that's certainly a way to think about it. And Simon, I've been thinking a lot about this. I've been listening to people a lot about this, and almost everybody characterizes this the same way. This is really exciting and very terrifying. It's terrifying because I think it threatens many people on an existential level. This absolutely will replace many skill sets, perhaps some careers. And I think the only thing that will protect us in this environment is this emotional connection. I mentioned, I wrote a post a few weeks ago about, something about this existential threat. And I said, and I've been saying this for years, my friend, shouting it from the rooftops. The only thing that can save us in this environment is the personal brand, is our personal brand. Just as you're doing today with this show, you're creating content that's just essentially human, and you're adding your perspective and your beautiful words that you're using in this show and these keen questions, and that helps you connect with your audience in an emotional way. That can never go away. That can never be replaced. And in this world where you're right, we're going to have, I know several people right now that have written books. Chat GPT wrote the books for them, and they've published it under their name. I can't even imagine how many self-published books are going to come out, blog posts. And, it's going to be in the next 2 years, we'll be able to create beautiful movies with AI from our kitchen table with almost no effort or no expense. So, this tsunami of content is coming at us, and the emotional connection we can create with A, personal brands, B, communities. That's really the only thing. I can't even, and I've thought about this a lot. You describe me as a futurist. It's a word I've reluctantly adopted for myself, but I do have a good track record of sort of seeing how trends come together and seeing where things are going to go next. I do have a good track record of that. I cannot see a way out of this other than the emotional connection that comes from personal brands and community.
100%. I love that. And I think, look, that's back to the tagline for the book, belonging to the brand. It's why community is that last great marketing strategy, isn't it? And you mentioned something else there, which I think is equally important. We've seen the rise of the personal brand, haven't we? And I really appreciate your comments about, even what we're doing here today and the language that we're using and the emotional connection that we have here, and hopefully our audience has with this episode. But it's about adding that personal brand, that little bit of you, isn't it? That little sort of special bit of magic. And we've seen the rise of personal brands. And do you think that now is critical in business or in life? Because some people are not really investing in their personal brand today, Mark.
I honestly think it's everything. I mean, whether it's your brand or a corporate brand, we talked about how it's sort of an existential necessity right now. When I speak to college classes, there's about, I don't know, 50 or more universities. They're actually using my books as textbooks, which is, quite an honor. But I always offer to Zoom into these classes and do a Q&A with the students so they can ask me questions about my books. And every opportunity I have, Simon, I urge young people or anybody who will listen that you need to be working on your personal brand. It's the only sustainable competitive advantage we will carry with us throughout our careers, number one. And I think increasingly, the personal brand is the brand, all right? People may not know the name of your company. Most people don't know the name of my company, but they know you, they know me. And people aren't going to see our ads or believe our ads, but we do believe each other. We believe company leaders, company founders, technical experts, entrepreneurs, our friends, our neighbors. And so, I believe the personal brand is everything on an individual level and a corporate level. So it's really important. And I know, a lot of people kind of, poo-poo it, but the people that poo-poo it, ironically, have massive personal brands. They're already there. They've got a media team supporting them. So it's like just kind of silly.
Yeah, and you make a good point there, because people with media teams, I think of, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, what they're doing with Bing and AI now seems to be very interesting at this time of recording, or Tim Cook at Apple, or Elon Musk, or you name the name. But they do have people helping them. I'm not sure how many people Elon Musk has helping him. Maybe he does a lot himself. I'm not sure. But it's funny that you say that, because when you think of one of the big major brands, or at least I do, and I know many others, you think of the person, don't you? The individual. And it's like, you may not know the name of my company, but you'll know me. And that human element, that sort of connection, sort of intertwined with a brand, isn't it, nowadays?
Yeah. One of the examples I use in my classes is that when someone buys a Mercedes-Benz, for every car Mercedes-Benz sells, they spend $945 on advertising. Tesla spends zero. They don't even have an advertising department. And the reason is they've got Elon Musk. I kind of like the old Elon versus the new Elon, or maybe he's always been the same. But, to many people, he's the greatest entrepreneur and perhaps the greatest hero they have of this generation. He is the brand. Who do you love at Mercedes-Benz? Who do you love at, T-Mobile or, your insurance company? Probably nobody. And so I think this is a huge opportunity. And by the way, I'm now being asked to consult to big companies big global companies saying, we can't spend enough on advertising to get our message out. People don't see it. People don't believe it. They're reconsidering their whole marketing department. Instead of spending money on press releases no one's going to see or believe, they're surrounding these executives to help them create a personal brand, to help them be spokespersons for the company, because that's what will be believed.
Yeah, I really like that, Mark, because I know you've worked with some of the world's biggest brands and continue to do so. And I'm thinking of Microsoft that I mentioned, or Caterpillar, or Cat, or Adidas, or Cisco, Pfizer, the Wyndham Hotel Group, huge in their own right, and the Bank of Ireland. I'll throw that in there. But you've worked with a lot of international brands, J&J, Johnson & Johnson, etc., across many different disciplines. And it is true that when you think of certain brands, you can't think of a person. And yet the other ones, you can think of the person instantly because they sort of become the brand. Now, I want to change gear a little bit if I can, Mark, because I don't want to run out of time with you. And I want to ask you a few questions because I'd like to share with the audience around the world a little bit about the person that I'm catching up with on the show. And the question for you is about your own learning style. Obviously, you said you reluctantly took on the title of futurist, but you sure are predicting the future and helping brands and people in the moment with all of your wonderful content. But when you learn or take on board information, what's your preferred learning style? Is it audiobooks, podcasts? Do you pick up a book? Is it a particular genre or type of information? Do you read for pleasure? How does that work for you, Mark?
Yeah, I certainly have a reading orientation in terms of my preferred learning style. Ironically, I don't really read a lot of books, and that might sound strange, but as I mentioned, I've written 10 books. I blog every week. I've got a podcast that I haven't missed an episode in 11 years. So unfortunately, when you create all this content, you don't have a lot of time to consume a lot of content, not as much as I would like. So I tend to consume, I'm a voracious consumer of newsletters that are pointing out new ideas, new trends. And my learning style is I collect trends, and I'll give you an example. So in the last few weeks, I've given keynote speeches to a banking association and a bunch of people who own fitness clubs. Now, those are really, really different audiences. But what I do is I collect trends so I can give a speech and I can pluck out, here's what I read here, 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 here. This is relevant to you. And this is what I think is coming next. So I tend to just read things that are here now in the moment. I'd like to read more books. I'd love to read more books. I've got to find a way to do that. But that's sort of my consumption style right now.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Mark, because it's useful for people to know how that works in your world. And I think the curation of newsletters where you're sort of filtering the information that's coming to you, and I'm sure over many years you've sort of honed that down to the ones that you want to receive. I think that's a great suggestion. And the podcast is amazing. How have you not missed a day? That's an incredible achievement, Mark.
Well, I think that I've often said that consistency is more important than genius, because ultimately you want to become part of the fabric of someone's life. You want to become a habit. And to become a habit, you've got to show up and you can't let them down. So look, here's a certainty. I'm going to be sick. I'm going to have a crisis in my life. I'm going to go on vacation. You know those things are going to happen. So plan ahead, right? So I've got, maybe a dozen blog posts in my file. I could pull out if something bad happens, or if I'm just tired. If I see something coming ahead on the podcast, I'll plan ahead. I've got an extra show in my pocket there in case something would go wrong. when I got COVID and asked a co-host to take over for a few episodes. So, I mean, you've got to be consistent. It's, a lot of people might think, oh, well, no one's going to miss me if I miss a week. That's a slippery slope. So, I think the key to showing up well as an effective personal brand is consistency and the discipline to execute that way.
Thanks for that advice, Mark. The other thing I want to ask you is, now this could be back to your childhood, it could be something that happened to you yesterday, but you must have met people along the way who've inspired you or motivated you, or people that you admire. Or it might just be a character trait, Mark. So when I ask you that question, what springs to mind?
Well, the person that inspired me the most is easy to name. I got to study for 3 years when I was in graduate school under Peter Drucker. And, he's the most famous management marketing author and advisor, easily in history. He's always number one in the leading thought leaders of the century. And it was the greatest just experience of my professional life. And there's not a single day that goes by that I don't hear his voice in my head, because he would just drill certain principles into us. In terms of characteristics, chemistry is just so important, Simon. I mean, chemistry in business. I had an example early in my career. I had a sales job, big sales job, and I was account manager for this multi-million-dollar account. And I was knocking heads with this purchasing manager. We could not solve these problems. Well, my boss and her boss were longtime friends. So my boss flew to Phoenix. We had this meeting. We went out to dinner with the four of us. My boss, we're having drinks. My boss said, well, we've got this problem. And I think we ought to probably do ABC. Her boss says, yeah, that sounds good. ABC. That was it. Months of struggle over in 20 seconds. And it's just a great lesson in relationships and chemistry. So I really value, the close, trusting, honest, authentic relationships that have, helped me be successful in business.
I love that, relationships and chemistry. That's either a book or a T-shirt. I need something there. I love that, Mark.
Yeah.
And obviously studying under Peter Drucker, I mean, what an exceptional gift, I suppose, would be the best way to describe that.
I had to fight for it because I was 27, I think, at the time, and everybody in this program had white hair. Everybody in this program was a vice president of something. And I was turned down 2 times. And on the 3rd time, I went to the dean of the business school and I said, I need to be admitted to this program for, equal opportunity. He looked at me and said, what? I said, I'm young. You don't have anybody young in this program. You need some fresh ideas. He laughed and he let me in. So it was truly an incredible opportunity. And I held my own.
Well, that's even better. And I love what you said about you can still hear his voice in your head every day. I think that's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Mark, I want to ask you as well about advice. Now, I'm sure you've listened, received, interpreted much advice over the years. But if I ask you about the best advice, something maybe that you've taken to heart, that stayed with you, that you call on, or maybe it's advice that you often find yourself sharing with people that you think is vital to share with our worldwide audience today, what springs to mind?
Well, again, it would come from Dr. Drucker, and one lesson he taught me. In the way he taught was the Harvard case study method. And we went into these insanely complex business problems. And I think the advice he would give us is especially relevant today. He said, a leader doesn't have to have all the right answers. You can't possibly know everything. You have to ask the right questions. Now, today, we're living in this world of malignant complexity. Nobody can be an expert in anything. nobody can explain the internet. Nobody can explain the economy. But, and I think it's just going to get worse for all of us. But I think we need to be involved, be immersed in these new ideas, in these new technologies, to at least to the extent that we know their potential, so we can ask the right questions. So I think that's been profound advice for me. It's certainly informed my consulting approach, not trying to have all the right answers. I approach things very humbly, honoring the expertise of the people I work with. And if I ask the right questions, we'll get to the right answers.
I love that a lot. I really like that. I think, the better the question, typically the better the answers. Yeah. And spending a bit of time trying to figure out what it is you're actually asking. I think that's sage advice, Mark. I want to squeeze two in real quick. The first one is, as you look forward over the next 6-12 months, what are you hoping to achieve? What's on the roadmap for Mark? What does that look like for you?
Well, curiously, I'm taking a step back. What I realized is over the years, I've gotten lazy on basic marketing practices for myself and my website. I've just ignored some things. And honestly, business was just coming in pretty easily, and I just ignored some basic things. And I reflected over the holidays that I just need to get back to some basics. I'm not even really setting a good example for people because I need to do some better. I need to show up in a better way on my website and my marketing. So that's going to be one of my major focuses for the year. And of course, belonging to the brand, I'm excited about this new book. I'm going to be doing a lot of discussions about that, working on a new speech, maybe even a new class about community. So that's going to be something I'm very excited about in the next year.
That sounds great. And the last thing I want to ask you, Mark, is there anything that I haven't touched on, or any other part of your life that you'd like to share with us, or anything else that's going on in the wonderful world of Mark Schaefer? And also, please do let us know if people want to catch up with you, find out about the book, the blog, the podcast, everything. Where's the best place to send people to?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Simon, for being so well prepared and for reading my book and asking me great questions that I haven't been asked before. That's always appreciated. And I'm sure your audience appreciates that as well. In terms of, something else, one of the big messages of my life and of my practice is, I wrote this book called Marketing Rebellion. So far, it's my best-selling book. Hopefully it won't be, but so far it is. And the subtitle is The Most Human Company Wins. And I think as your listeners navigate this very complex world, I really think if we examine everything we do and think about how can we be the most human company, the most human university, the most human podcast, the most human nonprofit, those are the companies that are going to win, because in this age of information overload and this imposition of technology into every aspect of our life, we are going to be seeking and we're longing for those human connections. So if you're doing things that people don't like, if you're spamming people or doing practices that they don't like, stop that and double down on things that people love, like community, because the most human company will win. And to find more about me, it's very easy. Businesses Grow. Nobody can remember how to spell my name, but Businesses Grow. If you can remember that, you can find my blog, my podcast, my books, and all my social media connections.
Well, Mark, I think that's a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much indeed for being a guest on today's show of the Global Discussion. Thank you to everybody around the world who's either watching or listening to the show. And join me back here to find out more about further discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. So thank you, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's been a privilege. Continued success, my friend.
Thank you.